Hello, welcome to Big Picture Monday. My name is Cali Black here with all the context you need to totally rock this week's Come Follow Me readings. This week we are studying Mosiah chapters 4 through 6. So only a few chapters, and we are finishing up what we started last week. So make sure you've read last week or you know what's going on, because this is very much a closing companionship to what we started last week, which has everything to do with Benjamin. King Benjamin, good old King Benjamin. Now, King Benjamin is the king of Zarahemla. Zarahemla is basically the new hub for all of the righteous people. That's where a lot of the remainder of the Book of Mormon is going to center around. You'll remember that there was a man named Mosiah. I'm going to call him Grandpa Mosiah just to keep things straight. There's a man named Grandpa Mosiah back when everyone was living in the land of Nephi. And everyone was starting to just get wicked and mixed together. And Grandpa Mosiah was told by the Lord, take the righteous people and go somewhere else. So Grandpa Mosiah took the righteous people and they found the land of Zarahemla. There was a people already living there, but they all combined together. They're like, we need a new king now. Who should it be? It should be Mosiah, that Grandpa Mosiah. So he becomes the king over Zarahemla. We don't have too much information about Grandpa Mosiah's reign, like what he actually did. We don't have too much information about that. But then he passed the kingdom on to his son named King Benjamin. And Benjamin took over. We actually don't even get tons of information about what Benjamin did as a ruler of his people, other than we know there was a big battle with the Lamanites, and Benjamin fought in defense of his people and led them to a victory. But that's about it that we know, like, politically that happened. Basically, when we pick up Benjamin's story, it's at the very end of his life. It's at the end of his life, and he knows he's about to die. And he wants to do a few things before he dies. First of all, he wants to make sure that the kingdom is going to be passed on to someone that he knows is ready for it. And so he chooses, out of his sons, he has one son named Mosiah. So that's why I called the other one Grandpa Mosiah. This Mosiah is a Mosiah that you're probably more familiar with, even though we're not talking about him too much this week. And so he tells Mosiah, you are going to be the next king. And then the second thing that he wants to do before he dies is he wants to gather everyone together and give them just a powerful spiritual speech. He really wants to remind them of the main spiritual lessons that he hopes that he's taught them and that kind of stuff. So that speech, we started it last week. Okay, I hope you had so much fun diving into the beautiful messages there, especially about service, right? So many great teachings from Benjamin. And this week, we are going to finish up that speech. We still get to hear from King Benjamin, yay! But we're also going to see the reaction of the people who are listening to this speech from King Benjamin. And that is where some of the richest lessons come from this week, is what's the reaction of the people listening. I mean, King Benjamin's teachings itself are very rich as well, especially Mosiah chapter 4. Boom. So many good scriptures as you read it. You're gonna be like, oh, I'm familiar with that. I've quoted that before. Love Mosiah 4. So Mosiah 4, our first chapter this week, starts off with a first part of a reaction. The people are so happy with what Benjamin has taught them already that they fall to the earth and they start to praise God. And Benjamin then sees this reaction and he is so pleased. He is so happy that the people are like catching on to what he's trying to teach them. And so he continues to teach them. He says that they are receiving a remission for their sins. He can tell that they are sincere and that they are being forgiven. He teaches them that if you're humble, if you pray and you have faith, God will protect you. He will save you. He reminds everyone that we are actually all beggars before God. He encourages everyone to give generously to the people around them, and that we should watch ourselves and our thoughts. So after all these teachings, we come to Mosiah 5, and then we get even more of a reaction this time. Mosiah 5 is where you're going to want to really pay attention to what the people are doing. And as you look at that, look for the similarities between what they're doing and the covenants that you've made. Chapter 5 is all about covenants, but it's not like about covenants in that, I don't know, there's not like a bunch of teachings about it necessarily. It's more let's look at what these people are doing. And what can we learn about covenants based off of what these people are doing? So look, as you read through chapter 5, look for those similarities between the covenants you've made and what you see these Nephites doing, the people of Zarahemla, as they have finished hearing this beautiful speech from King Benjamin. So first thing that they do, they again fall to the earth and they plead for forgiveness. I just think that's such an interesting pattern. That's how most spiritual experiences start, is when someone is pleading for forgiveness. There's something powerful to learn there. And they come to the point where they say, we want to make a covenant. We love God so much. We want to covenant to do his will. We want to promise that we will spend the rest of our lives doing whatever God asks us to do. Benjamin, of course, is again thrilled to hear this, and he says, you can do it. Make the covenant. Make the covenant with God. And he continues to teach them a little bit more, like, when you make this covenant, you will have a new name. And that new name is that you will be the children of Christ. And you'll have that new name as long as you live, as long as you don't forget God. If you don't turn away from him, you will be able to keep that new name of the children of Christ. He encourages everyone to serve God, to be steadfast and immovable, and it finishes up there with their covenant. And I think it's interesting to note that these people who are there promising we will do God's will for the rest of our lives, they did. Just fast forwarding, they did stay converted. The people who were old enough to know what they were doing and to actually make a conscious commitment to their covenants, they were converted. And they did stay committed for the rest of their lives. And I just love this positive example of what covenants can really look like. So much to learn from the actions in chapter 5. I love it. Chapter 6 then starts off interestingly in that Benjamin says, well, now that you've all made covenants, I need records. I need to collect everyone's names who's made that covenant. Again, think of some similarities to covenants that you've made. Having records and recording what's been done here on earth is very important. Very important. And at this point, the speech is over. That's it. He wraps it up, and Mosiah becomes the new king. Benjamin passes the kingdom on to his son Mosiah. We learn that Mosiah is 30 years old when he becomes the king, and we also learn that Benjamin actually is alive for 3 more years. So he stays around for 3 more years. I'm sure that there was some nice mentoring going on from Benjamin to Mosiah during that 3-year kind of like transition period where Mosiah's the king, but his dad Benjamin is still around, someone who everyone loves and respects and trusts. But then Benjamin does eventually die, and Mosiah starts his reign in absolute righteousness. And that's where we end off this week. Now, this Mosiah that is becoming the new king right now, this is the Mosiah that is the one who this book is named after. We're reading in the book of Mosiah. It's this Mosiah that it's named after. We have lots of things to talk about when it comes to what Mosiah did, and also Mosiah's sons will play a very big role later on. So keep that in mind as we're keeping these storylines straight. Mosiah is important, and also look out for what happens in the next generation. We've got Grandpa Mosiah, Benjamin, Mosiah. We'll see what happens next when we get to that point. Now for the timeline as to what's going on, it's kind of interesting because it says at the beginning of Mosiah's reign here, right at the end of King Benjamin, beginning of Mosiah's reign, it's been 476 years since Lehi first left Jerusalem. And I feel like at this point in the Book of Mormon, that's when it starts to get just very tricky to keep track of times. We went through those small books where we just like zoomed through a few hundred years really fast, right? And so now it's like 476. That is a long time. Like Joseph Smith lived 200 years ago. Like 476 years is a very long time from when Lehi first left Jerusalem. And so it's just kind of hard to imagine this. But we do know that Lehi left Jerusalem in 600 BC, which means I think at this point it's now easier to translate everything into what year BC it is. Now, as a reminder, BC means before Christ, meaning before Christ was born, not Christ's death, not Christ's appearance to the Americas, right? Before Christ's birth. In fact, he was likely, the way they keep track is that Christ was born in year 1, actually. So Christ didn't appear in the Americas until we say the year 34 AD. So just to keep that all in mind. He didn't appear in the Americas at 1 AD. That was 34 AD. Anyways, I did the math for you. Unless you want to do the math, go for it. Pause this video and do the math yourself. But that means that Mosiah became the king in 124 BC. That makes a lot more sense, right? We're getting close to when Christ is coming. Like, it's really only a few generations away, and we're going to start seeing that as things start to pick up and the timeline continues. So we're getting closer. The story is moving on, and we're going to learn about some more amazing people. I'm excited. Okay, that's it. It's now your turn. Dive into these 3 chapters, learn from the words Benjamin's teaching, learn from the examples of the people who heard Benjamin's words, and you're gonna have so much good stuff to study this week. So much good stuff. I think my personal focus question, I can't ignore covenants. I've already talked about them a lot just in this summary, but I think that will be my focus this week is, what does it really look like to make a covenant? I was just talking with someone recently about this, how I'm not even that old, but I feel like I didn't always understand what covenants were. It was kind of, growing up, it was just kind of this like vague thing. Like, I'd heard the word, and we were talking about how now we look at this rising generation and we have teenagers who know exactly what covenants are. We have primary kids who know exactly what covenants are and what covenants they're making at baptism, and they're looking forward to making more covenants in the temple. And I just think it's so cool to see the restoration of the church in real time, because we know the restoration is ongoing, and I can just see like the church and the gospel is becoming even more focused on like, okay, this is actually all about covenants. That's really what we're going after. That's the church's purpose, is to get everyone to the point where they want to make covenants, and they're going to make covenants that they're going to keep so that they can have power and they can devote their lives to God. Like, that's the purpose of the church. And I just feel like we're seeing this huge transition in the church where that view is more clear, and the rising generation is getting that viewpoint. And even us that are a little bit older than that rising generation, I feel like we're starting to make that switch as well. And so I just want to reflect on my own personal experiences. Am I internally making that transition? Am I making covenants? Am I choosing to keep my covenants? Doesn't matter so much how I felt on the day I first made the covenants as it does how do I feel right now about them. Am I desperate to keep my covenants with God out of my love and devotion for Him? That is a powerful question to think about. So much about covenants this week. All right, have a great week this week, and happy studying.